Welcome back. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States. Mr. President, thank you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
This Super Bowl is going to be unlike any other. I mean, about 25,000 fans in the stands. Do you think a year from now there will be a Super Bowl where they can play in front of a full stadium?
It's my hope and expectation, if we're able to put together and make up for all the lost time fighting COVID that's occurred, that we'll be able to watch the Super Bowl with a full stadium. The Super Bowl is just one of those great American celebrations, and all those house parties, all those things that aren't happening. But God willing, we're going to be able to celebrate it all as usual a year from now.
But there may be some house parties happening.
Oh, I'm sure there are. I know it's hard. It was hard at Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's. But, you know, I hope people, if you're watching, be careful. Be careful.
People want to know when things are going to get back to normal.
Yep.
And the road ahead is pretty daunting. To get herd immunity, Dr. Fauci has said you have to have at least 75% of Americans vaccinated. We did the math, and at the current rate of 1.3 million doses a day, it's going to take almost a year to get there. Can we wait that long?
No, we can't. That's why one of the disappointments was when we came into office is the circumstance relating to how the administration was handling COVID was even more dire than we thought.
The Trump administration.
The Trump administration. We thought they indicated there was a lot more vaccine available, and it didn't turn out to be the case. So that's why we've ramped up every way we can. I got a call through Commissioner Goodell saying we could have all 32 NFL stadiums available for mass vaccinations. We are...
Are you going to use them, NFL stadiums, to vaccinate?
Absolutely we will. I mean, let me put it this way. I'm telling my team they're available, and I believe we'll use them. Look, it was one thing if we had enough vaccine, which we didn't, so we're pushing as hard as we can to get more vaccine manufactured.
You're President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief. Can you do something in terms of going to Moderna, going to Pfizer, saying we need more production?
Yes, I think, because we've already done it. But the idea that this can be done and we can get to herd immunity much before the end of this summer is very difficult. And then the other thing that I'm very concerned about, and we've talked about this before, is making sure that the most damaged and hurt neighborhoods and people, Hispanics, people of color, African Americans, et cetera, they're dying at much higher rates. They're getting the COVID at much higher rates than white Americans. And there also is an understandable inhibition on the parts of some of those communities to not trust the government. One of the good things is that the vaccines tested here in the United States.
Let's turn to schools.
Sure.
About 20 million American children have not been in the classroom for nearly a year. There's a mental health crisis happening.
There really is.
Women are dropping out of the workforce. Is this a national emergency?
It is a national emergency. It generally is a national emergency. And women are dropping out of the workforce because they either have to stay home with their children, or if they had a job, go to work, and what do? Child care is extremely expensive. That's why one of the things in the proposal I put together provides for child care as well.
Do you think it's time for schools to reopen?
I think it's time for schools to reopen safely. Teachers want to go back. My wife's a teacher. They want to go back to school, but what they were initially told, and the science seemed to dictate, is you have to have fewer people in the classroom. You have to have ventilation systems that have been reworked. You have to have more school buses because not as many kids can get on one school bus. You've got to have sanitation and in the everything from the dining room to the lavatories. Our CDC commissioner is going to be coming out with science-based judgment within, I think, as early as Wednesday as to lay out what the minimum requirements are. I made a commitment that we try to get K through 8 back to school by the end of this 100 days.
There are teachers' unions across the country, though, that are resisting efforts to open classrooms. Mike Bloomberg, you know Mike Bloomberg,
Yep.
He has said it's time for Joe Biden to stand up to teachers' unions because kids are the most important things. Is that going to happen?
They are, and I've met with the teachers' unions. They want to go back to school. They need some guidance.
It's so hard with kids not being able to play sports now. A lot
It really
of kids.
is. I think about the price so many of my grandkids and your kids are going to pay for not having had the chance to finish whatever it was. That graduation where you didn't get to walk across the stage. I think they're going through a lot, these kids.
Let's talk about your American Rescue Plan.
Yes.
You've said you're not compromising on the $1,400 checks. You
No.
made that promise, you're sticking to it. So the big question is who gets the check?
Exactly right.
Is it someone who makes up to $50,000 or is it someone who makes up to $75,000?
I'm prepared to negotiate that, but here's the deal. Middle-class folks need help, but you don't need to get any help to someone making $300,000 or $250,000. So it's somewhere between an individual making up to $75,000 and phasing out and a couple making up to $150,000 and phasing out. But again, I'm wide open on what that is.
You also want to raise the minimum wage to $15. Is that something you would be willing to negotiate on in order to get Republican support?
Well, apparently that's not going to occur because of the rules of the United States Senate.
So you're saying the minimum wage won't be in this?
My guess is it will not be in it, but I do think that we should have a minimum wage, stand by itself, $15 an hour, and work your way up to the 15. It doesn't have to be boom. And all the economics show, if you do that, the whole economy rises. I'm prepared, as President of the United States, on a separate negotiation on minimum wage, to work my way up from what it is now, which is pain. Look, no one should work 40 hours a week and live below the poverty wage. And if you're making less than $15 an hour, you're living below the poverty wage.
But that may not be in your American Rescue Plan.
No, I put it in, but I don't think it's going to survive.
Let's turn to the impeachment trial. President Trump's impeachment trial. If you were still a senator, would you vote to convict him?
Look, I ran like hell to defeat him because I thought he was unfit to be president. I've watched what everybody else watched, what happened when that crew invaded the United States Congress. But I'm not in the Senate now. I'll let the Senate make that decision.
Well, let me ask you then something that you do have oversight of as president. Should former President Trump still receive intelligence briefings?
I think not.
Why not?
Because of his erratic behavior unrelated to the insurrection.
I mean, you've called him an existential threat. You've called him dangerous. You've called him reckless.
Yeah, I have, and I believe it.
What's your worst fear if he continues to get these intelligence briefings?
I'd rather not speculate out loud. I just think that there is no need for him to have that intelligence briefing. What value is giving him an intelligence briefing? What impact does he have at all, other than the fact he might slip and say something?
The U.S.-China relationship is probably one of the most important in the entire world. Why haven't you called Xi Jinping?
Well, we haven't had occasion to talk to one another yet. There's no reason not to call him. I probably spent more time with Xi Jinping, I'm told, than any world leader has, because I had 24, 25 hours of private meetings with him when I was vice president, traveled 17,000 miles with him. I know him pretty well.
There's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about, a whole lot to talk about. And he's very bright, he's very tough. He doesn't have, and I don't mean as a criticism, just a reality, he doesn't have a democratic small d bone in his body. But he is, the question is, I've said to him all along, that we need not have a conflict, but there's going to be an extreme competition. And I'm not going to do it the way that he knows this, because he's been sending signals as well, that I'm not going to do it the way Trump did. We're going to focus on international rules of the road.
Will the U.S. lift sanctions first in order to get Iran back to the negotiating table?
No.
They have to stop enriching uranium first. Let me turn to your son, Hunter Biden. He has written a memoir to be published in April.
So
have you read it?
I have. I've only gotten halfway through it. I'm so damn proud of him. He has enormous talent. He's a brilliant young man. I'll bet there's not a family you know that doesn't have somebody in the family that had a drug problem or an alcohol problem. And he's gone through hell. Didn't even know it was being written until about a month and a half ago and knew nothing about it until about 5 days ago. He thinks it's a way to help other people. I mean, this is a guy who, when he was 3 years old, was pinned in the car with his dead sister and dead mother and his brother. But the honesty with which he stepped forward and talked about the problem and the hope that it gave me hope reading it. I mean, it was like, my boy's back. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm sorry to get so personal.
No, I asked the question, so thank you for answering it. Mr. President, you've certainly been around the White House for a long time. You've walked into the Oval Office, you were vice president for 8 years. But did it feel a little different when you walked in as president of the United States and sat down on the other side of the Resolute desk?
You know what it felt different? When I walked through the front doors of the White House after being sworn in.
There was that picture of you embracing
the
First Lady.
Yeah, you know, President Clinton and I used to talk about who's read the most biographies of presidents. He's probably read more than I, but I've read a lot of them. And I've always thought about presidents in terms of Abraham Lincoln up there, or Franklin Roosevelt, or George Washington. And I thought to myself, how in God's name could I compare myself to them? But then I realized I know 8 presidents. I've served with 8 terms. I know them. They're all really fine men, and you know their strengths and their weaknesses in it. And it gave a little more of, well, don't get me wrong. I think it's an incredibly challenging job, and I'm extremely flattered to have a chance to do it. And I hope to God I live up to it. But it seemed to make it more life-size.
So many people may not know that you were once a pretty good receiver yourself back in the day.
I had wild dreams that wasn't to be president. I thought I could be a flanker back in the NFL.
But as a former receiver, which quarterback would you rather have throw to you? Tom Brady or Mahomes?
Obviously, Brady's a great quarterback. Mahomes seems like he's got a lot of potential. And so I'd probably take a shot with the young guy that didn't expect as much from.
You thinking the Kansas City Chiefs may win?
Well, I didn't say that. I don't know who's going to win. I think they're both great quarterbacks. One is just a younger version, potentially, of an old, great quarterback. Not old, in NFL terms, old.
Mr. President, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the game.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm Norah O'Donnell, CBS News, the White House.